Hello everyone and welcome to Edusurg Clinics. I am Dr. Gunjan Desai and today we are going to discuss a very important topic, and that is fever of unknown origin or pyrexia of unknown origin, and a contemporary diagnostic blueprint is going to be discussed here. Why we are discussing this topic? This is because this is not only a medical topic. These patients do turn up for surgery. We have reported a case where a patient with hepatic hemangioma presented with fever of unknown origin, and after extensive investigations that was the only cause, an inflammatory pattern of fever, and that resolved only after surgery. So many times you will see patients with fever of unknown origin, whether you are a physician or a surgeon, and this is a 2026 guideline that you can use in your practice. So remember that the core philosophy of pyrexia of unknown origin management has evolved, and now it is rarely a rare disease, but it is basically an atypical presentation of a common disease. So whenever we are looking at disease patterns in clinics, it can be a typical presentation of a common disease, an atypical presentation of a common disease, then a typical presentation of a rare disease, and then an atypical presentation of a rare disease. So there are four patterns that you can see in your clinic in any patient, and the aim is to identify which pattern you are dealing with. So the goal initially was that you do a random number of tests and try to identify the cause. This exhaustive untargeted testing is no longer the current guideline. The modern approach is that you do a stepwise filter to isolate atypical manifestations. As you can see here in the definition also, when it was defined in 1961, the definition included fever greater than 101 degree Fahrenheit or 38.3 degrees Celsius for a duration greater than 3 weeks, which is also here in 2026, but in an immunocompetent adult only. And now we have minimal standard investigations which need to be done before labeling the patient as a pyrexia of unknown origin patient. So the shift is from using a very random form of workup to a very consensus based workup with a specific set of minimal standard investigations, and then determine if the patient has PUO and then treat accordingly. Now we know the difference between the high income versus the low or middle income regions. The inflammatory disorders or the non infectious disorders dominate in nearly one fourth of the patients, versus in low income region where the infectious disease dominates in nearly half of them, with tuberculosis being the leading infection worldwide. Remember that whenever you are seeing these patients, a very important history is the travel history, because that can give you a clue to different infections that can present in particular areas. So, what is the six-step Delphi pathway that has been recommended in this article? The first step, as always, is comprehensive history and physical examination. Evaluate potential diagnostic clues. This is important because this will point you towards what tests you need to do. Then objectively verify fever, whether it is factitious, whether there is a pattern of fever. We will see this in upcoming slides. Once you have done these points, do the minimal standard investigations, and these will give you the fever of unknown origin criteria. If all the minimum standard investigations are normal, that is when you can label your patient as FUO, and then go towards advanced imaging, and then continue evaluation or empirical therapy. And there are some situations where you may have to break this chain of investigations and treat immediately, and these are the exceptions to the rules, and we will see them as well. So in history and physical examination, we have a video on history taking. But for fever of unknown origin, some specific points, like I said, a very important point is travel history, contact with pets and animals, unpasteurized milk, brucella, very commonly seen, abattoir work or slaughterhouse work, and soil exposure. Coming to medical history, we know that drug related fever accounts for nearly 18% of cases of PUO. So that is important. history of previous febrile illnesses, and family history such as familial Mediterranean fever. Patterns of fever are usually not seen in today's day because a lot of patients consume antipyretics on outpatient basis. But still, you know the tertian and the quotidian patterns, and you can see if they are present. Usually, these patterns are not present when these patients present to the clinic. Like I said, factitious fever needs to be ruled out. The red flags are that the patient reports markedly elevated temperature with resolves without sweating. This is a very classical history of factitious fever. Also, the patient may not have tachycardia when there is fever, and this pulse temperature dissociation is also a sign that the patient may have factitious fever. Discrepancy between simultaneous oral and rectal measurements, but something that is not routinely done. Also, lack for normal diurnal variation. So, these are some of the points where factitious fever can be ruled out. Very important point is markedly elevated temperature without tachycardia and rapid resolution without sweating. So these are important points that you need to see. Now, once you have ruled out and taken your history and examination, identifying potential diagnostic clues, then this is the set of minimal standard investigation that you need to do. And once you do this test is when you determine if your patient has fever of unknown origin, if all these tests are normal. So the laboratory parameters include CBC with differential, metabolic panel, ESR, C-reactive protein, ferritin, TSH, rheumatoid factor, ANCA and ANA. Microbiology includes blood and urine culture. TB screening test, IGRA is basically having a very high negative predictive value in immunocompetent individuals. So you can rule out TB if IGRA is negative. And HIV 1 and 2 screening can be done. Then goes to imaging where you at least do an abdominal ultrasound and a chest x-ray, if not a CT chest abdo pelvis. So once you have done all these tests and you can't find the source, 3 weeks have passed by, patient still has fever, then your patient has fever of unknown origin. Remember that potential diagnostic clues that you get in your history and examination may not always lead you to a diagnosis, but they are important. So the diagnostic yield in literature is around 20% if you have only one diagnostic clue, and majority of them can be misleading or false positive. So the clues must be pursued, but the expectations should not be very high. If you see a single enlarged node, it may not be that significant, but it needs to be pursued, and you need to rule out that there is a node related pathology in the patient. Now, the common suspects of PUO that we see are most importantly tuberculosis. We know the classical history is unexplained weight loss, night sweats, fever. IGRA, like I said, has a high negative predictive value, and it is highly prevalent in low and middle income regions, especially for patients who are in these areas. TB is one of the most common diagnoses in these patients. Q fever, not commonly seen but can present with elevated AST, ALT, and thrombocytopenia. Inflammatory markers may be normal. Abattoir work, exposure to animals, and unpasteurized milk is the common history. For brucellosis, you will see moldy hay perspiration, fevers which are peaking in afternoon, and a classical symptom of sacroiliitis. Middle East Mediterranean exposure is commonly seen. Important laboratory parameter is pancytopenia and consumption of unpasteurized dairy in history. Non-infectious inflammatory disorder and something that may need an emergency treatment is giant cell arteritis, where age greater than 50 with jaw claudication and visual changes is the classical presentation. The platelets are high and ESR is very high in these patients. You can see halo sign in the ultrasound, or on FDG PET you will see uptick. Adult onset still disease, again common with high grade fever spike, sore throat, and salmon colored rash. You will see hyperferritinemia in these patients with a negative rheumatic factor and ANA, and this is usually seen as a diagnosis of exclusion. Coming to sarcoidosis, we know the erythema nodosum, swelling in parotid, usually bilateral, dry eyes, hilar lymphadenopathy on imaging is very common in chest. Important laboratory parameter here is hypercalcemia and elevated ACE levels that we routinely do if we want to rule out sarcoidosis in patients with bulky adenopathy. Now we know that nowadays FTG PET CT is also routinely used. Again, a test with a high negative predictive value is FDG PET. Diagnostic yields range between 85 to 98%, and it is highly sensitive for glycolytically active cells which are seen in inflammation, infection as well as neoplasia. Remember that PET is to be done only once you have done the minimal standard investigations, you have ruled out the emergency situations, you have ruled out the common culprits that cause FUO, and then do your PET scan. Correlates with a 6 times higher rate of spontaneous fever remission if the PET scan is negative. So, this is something that is very important when it comes to PET scan activation. So when it comes to comparison between CT or ultrasound versus FDG PET, like I said, CT or ultrasound is basically your minimal standard investigation. Yield is also 80 to 90% here, but these can miss small infiltrating malignancies, early abscesses, and large vessel vasculitis, whereas PET is the modality of choice for giant cell arteritis and it has lower yield for non-infectious inflammatory disorders compared to infections or malignancies. So, like I said, history, examination, clues, assess the clues, rule out the common pathologies, then do the minimal standard investigations, including the bloods, microbiology, and imaging. If all of this is not giving an answer, then PET scan is your next answer. Remember that the important point is to manage symptoms, maintain a longitudinal care plan. Therapy must be withheld as long as possible till you get the cause. An empirical trial is done in only specific areas. So, what are these areas where you break protocol and initiate immediate empirical therapy? Like I said, one of the important diagnosis to rule out is temporal arteritis or giant cell arteritis. You need to initiate steroids immediately to prevent irreversible vascular complications like stroke or blindness. Another important area, if the patient presents with hemodynamic instability, then sepsis protocols immediately need to be started, and this is no longer the watchful waiting type of scenario in fever of unknown origin. Another important condition where you need to break protocol, initiate immediate empiric therapy is when profound neutropenia is discovered during the minimal standard diagnostic workup. And this is important because the FUO criteria apply only in immunocompetent adults. Another important category is tuberculosis, like we already discussed. It is one of the most common diagnoses when these patients present to you, but in today's world, it is very important that we get a diagnostic test positive before we start treatment. However, in some extreme scenarios, you may start treatment in endemic areas. The good news here is that if you have all the tests negative, including a PET scan, 75% of these patients experience spontaneous resolution of fever over time. So, patients remain undiagnosed after a standardized evaluation, tend to have a highly favorable outcome, especially when the PET scan is negative. However, in the danger zone, the problem, especially that we have seen, is a non Hodgkin's lymphoma, and especially in cases with malignancies, the mortality is nearly 6 to 7%. We have some new molecular diagnostics now in PUO, but these are not routinely advised and these are not routinely available. So reserve them for patients who remain unexplained and still have fever after completion of all the tests that we have discussed so far. Beware for colonizing non-pathogenic microbes. So to summarize the guidelines, you need to identify the patient in clinic where they are heading towards a fever of unknown origin criteria, apply the minimal standard investigations, rule out potential diagnostic clues, If there is a lymph node, you may need a lymph node biopsy or a PET scan. Minimal standard investigations will point you towards a diagnosis. If not, then a PET scan is next in line. Empirical therapy is reserved for situations that we discussed. If all this workup is negative, there is a high probability that the patient may resolve on its own, and you need to rule out malignancies in these patients. So that is how we should work up these patients, a very important topic. You should read this article if this topic interests you, and treat these patients on the structured protocol that your institution will follow when it comes to fever of unknown origin, because the common diseases that are associated with this diagnosis vary as per centers, and the minimal standard investigations are such that they can be applied across centers, but you will have a specific list of tests and a specific cause for FUO based on your institutional practice, based on the region where you practice in the world. So that is something that you also need to consider. Thank you.